I love this part, where one of the Dems fell completely silent when I simply asked him whether he thinks 16-year-olds can consent. You know, if I was Matt Walsh, I don't know that I would be a public figure out of embarrassment. I also don't know the capacity for me to exist within public life in any capacity. You know, I would question that as well if I was Matt Walsh, but luckily I've not had the misfortune to be Matt Walsh. But if I was him, I don't think I would be talking about and using this line of argumentation in regards to, oh my God, can 16-year-olds consent to gender-affirming care? Because clearly, he thinks that 16-year-olds can consent to getting pregnant and marrying an adult, which he did not refute when questioned in the testimony. I don't know that that's the argument I'd be making, man. Especially not if you've defended people like disgraced Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who was found guilty of sexual crimes against adults and minors by the Catholic Church. I don't think that, you know, this is the person we're gonna go to for critiques of consent. But let's see. So if you haven't followed me on Twitter, and you definitely should because I post good stuff on there, it seems like recently I have gotten under the skin of noted inquisitor of the age of consent, Matt Walsh. I've gotten under his skin. Now, it wasn't very difficult. It's quite thin skin. I didn't have to do a lot of digging, but I'm currently subcutaneous in Matt Walsh's brain right now. He decided to quote tweet me. So I saw this video from the Tennessee Holler on my timeline because somebody retweeted it or quote tweeted it, where it is a clipped together video from Matt Walsh testifying in the affirmative for a ban on gender-affirming care in Tennessee. That is where he lives. And he did not perform very well. The video makes him look quite bad. Now, it is edited. They did cut clips together. It's a 2-minute and 20-second video, and the Tennessee Holler is not verified at time of filming on Twitter, so they do not have the capacity to upload longer videos than that. So clearly this is uploaded with brevity in mind, trying to get to the major points. I saw this video, and I was like, oh, he looks like shit. I'm going to make fun of him now. So I did. The arguments that he makes in the video are not good. The arguments that he makes in the full context of the video are also not good. But it's Matt Walsh. He doesn't care for anything but power for power's sake and will do anything to attain it. He constantly lies and misrepresents literally everything he talks about. So he quote tweeted me saying, they're still trying to pass this edited clip around like everyone hasn't seen the full unedited footage that I posted. The full context doesn't actually make him look any better. I'm pretty sure the major reason why Walsh and his meat riders do not like this video in particular is because it adds additional context past the testimony itself that makes him look even worse, using his own words, because Matt Walsh looks bad by default. But let's look at the offending incident. Let's see what happened at the Tennessee gender-affirming care ban hearing. We'll watch this Tennessee Holler clip first, and then we'll look at what Matt Walsh himself has posted that he's very proud about. So for all the bots and meat riders out there that are like, oh my God, nice selective edit. How about you look at the context? How about you look at the full clip? I promise you it does not make him look any better. It only does for you because you are stupid. Anyway, so let's see what's got him all up in arms. Matt Walsh got absolutely rolled during the Tennessee gender-affirming care ban hearing. Holy. And he did.
Can you give us a summary of your educational background or your healthcare education?
So this is Representative John Ray Clemens, a Democrat from Nashville, questioning Matt Walsh in a committee hearing where Matt Walsh is arguing in the affirmative to deny reality and subvert medical and scientific consensus on the treatment for trans people, adults, and youths in his support for this bill that would restrict access to that. So I would say that questioning somebody's medical background in this way is not completely out of left field.
I didn't go to college, but I did go to school long enough to learn how to read so I can read the data for myself, and that's exactly what I've done.
And for what
Clearly not. We'll get into it.
purpose do you conduct your research and use this brain of yours?
I use it for the purpose of trying to protect children from being castrated and mutilated.
You don't use it to
So notice he's referencing data. And we'll probably get into that data in the future, or at least any of his talking points about it. But you'll hear that he's like, oh, the mutilation and the castration of children. The reason why he has to use that kind of emotionally loaded language is because he doesn't have an actual good argument. He is very well aware that his views on the topic contradict the consensus that the experts and organizations whose literal job it is to come to these conclusions have arrived at. He doesn't like that. It makes him feel bad. So he has to use scary rhetoric talking about it, which are blatant lies, by the way. There are not children getting mutilated and castrated, but that's his major charge, even in the unedited clips that I've seen. He doesn't have an argument. He just has political motive. I also think he wants to see trans people suffer because it would give him some kind of sick pleasure And whatever form that pleasure takes, I do not know. I'm not in his head. If I was in his head, it would spontaneously explode because my brain could not possibly fit within his tiny little pea shell. We'll see.
You don't use it to get clicks.
Well, are you using it right now to try to get clicks with this interaction?
So you can't really know you, a sitting elected representative, when you are literally a propagandist. It's not to say that politicians can't also engage in propaganda, but you are literally a pundit online. It is your job to get clicks. Now, there are good ways to get clicks and bad ways to get clicks. It seems like Matt Walsh has decided that his best way to get clicks is to be as offensive and vitriolic as is possible in order to bait outrage from people, in order to drive negative engagement to his platform, as well as drive dumbasses stupid enough to believe what he says to support him and give him money, right? That's the way he's decided to do it. I would say, given my moral system, that's probably not a good way to do that. But the idea that a sitting representative is, oh, are you doing it for clicks, is probably just projection because he is aware that that's what he does. The only reason he is testifying at this hearing is the same reason why in his bullshit documentary, he literally had to allegedly fake a residence in like the basement of some random person in the state that he was in where he wanted to testify at a school board meeting in order to actually go to that school board meeting. It's for content. It's for clicks. That's what he does. That's his job, right? I also am trying to get clicks and views. No shit. It's also my job. But I don't think I'm doing it in the same negative way, right? That's the difference. But he's aware that that's what he does, so that's what he's going to accuse other people of doing when he's met with it.
You know, if you're going to come before a committee and make mischaracterizations and misrepresentations, it's fair game for us to ask you your educational background.
You seem to have started this, so you have no medical background, correct?
No.
You're trying
So
to...
it says you seem to have started this, and this is actually accurate. Matt Walsh has literally bragged about the fact that he was one of the major players in pushing this specific legislation in Tennessee. He has literally bragged about the fact that he was very involved in the process of the crafting of this legislation. So it is not unfair to say that he started it, or he was part of what started the entire conversation, trying to ban the healthcare, which is the consensus for a reason. It is fair to question your medical credentials if that is the case.
You're trying to address good public policy, correct?
Yes.
I just have to question, some of your public policy. Singapore is able to have nice things in part because they execute drug dealers by hanging and arrest even petty vandals and thieves and beat them with a cane until they bleed. We don't have...
Really nice guy, this Matt Walsh. Definitely not any violent tendencies with this guy.
Nice things here because we aren't willing to do what is required to maintain them. I kind of have to question your public policy beliefs. And you also stated there'd been...
So yeah, it is reasonable, as this representative is saying, to question your public policy opinions if you are literally advocating for brutally beating drug addicts as like the way you think they should be treated, or even given the death penalty for them, right? I think it's fair to question your opinions on things divorced from that as well. So I don't think that's a non sequitur. I think it is relevant. He seems to have an overwhelmingly punitive view on public policy, which does contradict data we've seen on that specific topic and also the data we see on this one.
You're holding a study from the American Academy of Pediatrics, suicidal disparities between transgender and cisgender adults and children. Before you state things, you may need to know all the facts.
So the study that he's referencing, by the way, is a study that shows that access to gender-affirming care and supportive parents are the two major parts of what makes depression and suicidal ideation in trans youth go down dramatically by orders of magnitude, which seems to suggest that the reason why rates of depression and suicidal ideation or attempts are as high as they are is because of not having that support, not having that access to the healthcare that they need, and also the vitriol that they are met with in society by people like Matt Walsh, who are literally pushing legislation to restrict access to that care, right? That's a reasonable logic tree to get to that point.
On your blog, at about 16, you're an adult who's mature and can make decisions. You're that at 16. I don't care what anybody says, even going so far as to say when you're 16, you should be married and pregnant. 16.
He did say that. Matt Walsh did say that. They're just saying his words. They're just repeating his words to him, and it makes him upset. We'll get into that clip in the future, just by the way, if you're not familiar with it.
is an adult in your view, why does this bill have minor defined as 18?
I was a radio host 13, 14 years ago in my early 20s. It's also not an accurate reflection of what I actually said. I was talking about the fact that people tended to marry young historically, and that's all that was about. How does that relate to this?
He's obfuscating. He is literally obfuscating. And this is why he does not like this edited clip of his performance at the testimony. Because they're about to deliver his actual rhetoric on the issue. He is lying in the testimony. He said that, oh, well, that doesn't actually accurately reflect what I said. I was just talking about biological technicalities. But he goes further than that.
To all of a sudden act like this phenomenon of girls getting pregnant at a young age that we consider young, 16 or 17, to act like it's a new thing is ridiculous. It's always been that way. Girls between the ages of like 17 and 24 is when they're technically most fertile. Recently, in the last 30 years or so, we decided that's way too young to start a family. So what I'm saying is that the problem is not per se teenage pregnancy, it's unwed pregnancy. That's the problem in society.
Ah, that's the problem in society. So sure, if you're just stating biological technicalities about the fertility of girls as young as 16, and that's what he said, he is selectively omitting this further part of that same commentary, and also not refuting that commentary in his testimony when he's trying to defend himself against what he sees as a bad faith accusation or non sequitur. He says, quote, the problem is unwed pregnancy. That's the problem in society, not teenage pregnancy per se. Meaning that Matt Walsh is okay with teen pregnancy for girls as young as 16 so long as they are married. He has also advocated for young minor girls carrying their rapist babies to term because that would then provide evidence that they were raped if the baby is born. But if you abort the baby, the evidence is gone and you can't make a conviction. He doesn't care about convicting rapists. Let's just be honest here. So this is why they don't like this video. This is why. Because friend of the show, The Surfs TV, put out this clip. They found it, and it doesn't make him look very good. Especially if his entire MO is, oh my god, what about the children? We have to save the children. If those are the things you're talking about when it comes to children, I don't know that we should trust your thoughts on trying to protect children in any other arena. That's why they do not like this. It's not because it's an edited clip, like everybody hasn't seen the full unedited footage. It's because the added context to the clip makes you look worse than you already look, right? So he quote tweeted me because of this. He was very mad. Probably name searching, because I don't remember seeing anybody at him in the comments. So let's see. We'll get into the full clips in a second, and the substantiation for other claims that I've made. Matt Walsh has 1.3 million followers on Twitter. 1.3 million. And that is ostensibly after Elon Musk has gotten rid of a large amount of bots on the platform. That was one of the major stipulations that he had when he was thinking of buying it. And he's actually bragged about bots being removed from the platform. So 1.3 million followers from Matt Walsh. Then you have me, a lowly, no-name, 40.6k follower account, right? His quote tweet of me has 8,045 likes. The tweet he is quoting has 17.3k. So he couldn't even ratio a person who has orders of magnitude less followers than he does. Even though all of his followers are very excited to act like bots in my comments saying, oh my god, nice selective video. How about you post the unedited clip? How about you watch the unedited clip? This is so embarrassing for you. Your guy can't even ratio somebody who has literally got less than 100,000 followers. I am a nobody. I am a no-name. I'm shocked Matt Walsh cares enough to quote tweet me. But you know, I feel like if we're gonna do this, if I'm gonna have this be my username for like 7 hours or something, I might as well substantiate the claim. So I did in the original tweet that he quoted. Now, Matt Walsh dick riders don't really like this clip or the fact that I've shown it, but let's see what he has to say. I wrote, Ayo Walsh meat riders, the full clip doesn't make him look any better, you just don't like the added context. Also, here's your guy defending Theodore McCarrick, a former cardinal who was found guilty of sexual crimes against adults and minors by the Catholic Church. He also defends Roman Polanski in this video, I'm pretty sure. Or Asia Argento. Oh, he's defended a lot of people who have been convicted of heinous crimes against children, so you get him confused sometimes, you know?
Actresses willingly have sexual relationships with powerful men, sometimes for years. Asia Argento herself, I believe, she was in a sexual relationship ongoing with Harvey Weinstein for like 5 years. She kept going back and engaging.
Oh, okay, so Asia Argento was a victim of Harvey Weinstein's, my bad.
In this in this stuff with him. And they do this for the sake of movie roles and so on. And for more, power and clout in the industry.
But we're not going to talk at all about the power imbalance involved with Harvey Weinstein knowing that he has this power and trying to use it in order to get those people to succumb and be seduced by him in order, in promises for those. He doesn't care about that power imbalance or that weaponization of that power to victimize these women. Matt Walsh doesn't care about that because the women, they wanted the parts and whatnot. It makes you think about his other views about consent, but we'll get into that.
And then years later, after getting what they want out of it, they claim that they were being assaulted the entire time. And in the Catholic Church, you have you have some cases where cases involving Cardinal McCarrick. You hear about Cardinal McCarrick and the controversy surrounding him. Now, there are accusations that he molested children. So, that's in that category. But then a lot of the accusations you hear about McCarrick and also with other, some of these other things as well. These are, in some cases, he's having sex with seminarians. These are grown men.
There have been accusations of the Cardinal Theodore McCarrick weaponizing the power that he has in order to abuse children. Matt Walsh, big defender of children. Let's just sweep that under the rug because he's also used his power to abuse adult men as well. Really makes you think about his broader views of consent.
Who he allegedly lured into bed and then had sex with. But as a grown man, if you let another man lure you into bed and then you willingly, with no resistance, engage in sex acts with him, does that belong in the same category as the 12-year-old kids who are raped by men twice their size?
So he has no understanding of power imbalance or the weaponization of power to coerce people into doing things that they otherwise might not want to do. He has no idea. He doesn't care to think about it. He has no idea how to conceptualize it. His brain is soup. Or he's actively malicious. One of the two.
And then you also have the accusations against Asia Argento, where a guy at 17, legal age, in almost every state in the union, willingly has sex with this 100-pound Italian model, making no effort to leave the room or leave the situation. Then he comes back, blackmails her, demands money for it, and gets paid, and now he says he was traumatized by his willing participation in sex acts with a woman when he was a few months away from his 18th birthday. Does that belong in the same category as a woman or a child who gets pinned down and raped by a sex predator?
Notice that he's saying that at the end because he doesn't believe that men can be victims of assault like this, even young people at the age of 17. And the reason why is because he's also a misandrist. That's a very anti-man talking point. The idea that men cannot possibly be assaulted, like he said earlier, if you're a grown man who is abused by another grown man, you should have been able to fight your way out of that or whatever he's alluding to. That is an anti-male, an anti-man point. That is a misandrist talking point to suggest that men cannot be victims of abuse or to victim blame them in the instance that it happens. So there's that. So for more information on Theodore McCarrick, Theodore Edgar McCarrick is a laicized American bishop and former cardinal of the Catholic Church. Ordained a priest in 1958, he became an auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of New York in 1977, and then became Bishop of Metuchen, New Jersey in 1981. From 1986 to 2000, he was Archbishop of Newark. He was created a cardinal in February 2001 and served as Archbishop of Washington from 2001 to 2006. Following credible allegations of repeated sexual misconduct towards boys and seminarians, he was removed from public ministry in June 2018, very recently. Became the first cardinal to resign from the College of Cardinals because of claims of sexual abuse in July 2018 and was laicized in February 2019. McCarrick was accused of engaging in sexual misconduct with adult male seminarians over the course of decades. Though multiple reports about McCarrick's alleged conduct with adult seminarians were made to American bishops in the Vatican between 1993 and 2016, allegations of sexual abuse against minors were not known until 2018. In July 2018, the New York Times published a story detailing a pattern of sexual abuse of male seminarians and minors. After a church investigation and trial, so that's a church investigation and trial, the same church that has willingly looked away from abuses of people in the past. The same church who has an incentive to not find wrongdoing. the Catholic Church investigated him and put him to trial, and he was found guilty of sexual crimes against adults and minors and abuse of power and dismissed from the clerical state in February 2019. He is the most senior church official in modern times to be laicized and is the first known case of a cardinal being laicized for sexual abuse in the year of our Lord 2019. A lot more work to be done in the Catholic Church than this, but getting rid of him, I guess, is a good step. So this is the person that Matt Walsh is tacitly defending here when he talks about how, he glosses over the fact that he has now been, through the trial of the Catholic Church, found guilty of sexual crimes against minors. He brushes that aside to use his now found guilty of sexual crimes against adults in order to try to make it be like, maybe this guy isn't as bad as they're making out to be. Because if these grown adults can't fight back against it, if these grown adults, which we all know that, grown men, adults are completely immune to coercion based on power imbalances. That never happens. Surely not. If they aren't able to do it, then maybe he's not as bad of a guy. This is literally defense of a person who has been found guilty by the Catholic Church of sexual crimes against adults and minors. But this is the what about the children guy, you see. This is the what about the children? Oh my God, I'm here to save children. I just don't like it when they're abused guy. That's the entire foundation of the reason why he is in favor of and has bragged about being a pivotal part of crafting the legislation that he got embarrassed arguing the affirmative for at this Tennessee hearing. This clip he does not like because it adds that additional context, not because it's an edited video that's been selectively clipped. But let's see what else there is. If it's such an edited video, let's see what's going on. Oh, also, I will say, when it comes to his thoughts about the dubious nature of consent, should be this one.
Says that's what a lot of us have.
Oh, okay, and this is just a video where he's pulled over to the side of the road to argue against the dubious nature of consent. And that he thinks that, oh my God, there are so many things that the woke left has included in the conversation of consent that he doesn't believe are actually violations of it, by the way. So that, oh my God, the woke left has rendered the term meaningless, That's the context of it. I'll put it in the description if you want to have the displeasure of watching it. But we're about a half hour in already, and there's a bunch of other shit we got to get to. But there's, the substantiation for that if you want to see it. So here is Matt Walsh's own clip that he has decided to post and quote tweet from the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro from the hearing that apparently absolves him of any embarrassment by the leagues of fucking meat riders in my comments talking about selectively edited clips. Let's see. Today, I testified at a committee hearing in support of a bill banning child mutilation in Tennessee. A Democrat on the committee asked what qualifies me to speak on the subject. It was a very dumb question, but I tried my best to answer it for him. Let's see this clip.
Can you give us a summary of your educational background or your health?
So that's where this clip starts, just by the way. That's where this clip starts. This is what Matt Walsh himself has posted.
Healthcare, education, experience?
Mr. Walsh, you recognized.
My experience in healthcare?
Your educational background. I'm just curious. You've testified as to a lot of your own research. So I'm curious for what purpose you do that and what background you have to qualify you to speak to that.
Well, my background that qualifies me to speak to this is that I'm a human being with a brain and common sense, and I have a soul.
None of these are like actual arguments, by the way. None of these would hold up in court either. So like in a testimony, these are not the strongest arguments. I have a soul. You have an empirical, source to justify that claim.
And so therefore, I think it's a really bad idea to chemically castrate children. That is my experience.
But that's also not happening. The chemical castration of children, like I say, he has to use this violent rhetoric and imagery in order to trick people through fear into arguing against the medical and scientific consensus on the treatment of gender dysphoria and gender non-congruence in the youth and adults, because he doesn't think either should happen.
Now, it's true, I didn't go to college, but I did go to school long enough to learn how to read.
It's a low bar to clear.
So I can read the data for myself, and that's exactly what I've done.
Representative Clemens.
So let's see if he cites any of the data in these unedited clips. Apparently he's read it, and apparently that's what the data suggests.
And for what purpose do you conduct your research and use this brain of yours?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
I use it for the purpose of trying to protect children from being castrated and mutilated. That's one of the things I try to do.
You don't use it?
Luckily, it's not happening, so you're good. We're all clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You don't use it to get clicks on your publication?
So notice by this point, you don't use it to get clicks for this publication. You've noticed that we're almost done with the clip. And what's in the one that I had posted has not left much out other than him repeating himself and dead air.
Well, are you using it right now to try to get clicks with this interaction? No, I really like the
Mr.
idea
Walsh.
of getting of drawing attention to the fact that this is happening to children. I know you seem to find it very amusing. I don't.
Wow. What a mic drop moment, man. So, like, literally no sources cited. Let's see what else we have here. I love this part where one of the Dems fell completely silent when I simply asked him whether he thinks 16-year-olds can consent. So, if I was Matt Walsh, I don't know that I would be a public figure out of embarrassment. I also don't know the capacity for me to exist within public life in any capacity. I would question that as well if I was Matt Walsh, but luckily I've not had the misfortune to be Matt Walsh. But if I was him, I don't think I would be talking about and using this line of argumentation in regards to, oh my God, can 16-year-olds consent to gender-affirming care? Because clearly, he thinks that 16-year-olds can consent to getting pregnant and marrying an adult, which he did not refute when questioned in the testimony. I don't know that that's the argument I'd be making, man. Especially not if you've defended people like disgraced Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who was found guilty of sexual crimes against adults and minors by the Catholic Church. I don't think that, this is the person we're going to go to for critiques of consent. But let's see. So here's Ben Shapiro posting a clip. See what's up.
I found it, thank you, Mr. Walsh. I found it interesting. One of our people testified today that they had their gender affirming surgery at 16. And I know you in former comments mentioned this on your blog. At about 16, you're an adult who's...
Oh, okay. So now we're at the part of the clip where this person, Representative Caleb Hemmer, Democrat from Nashville, is talking about Matt Walsh's previous comments on the age of consent, which the context for is given in this clip, which is why Matt Walsh doesn't like it. The deceptive editing that they claim to be in this video is posting his own words and using them against him.
Today that they had their gender affirming surgery at 16. And I know you in former comments mentioned this on your blog. At about 16, you're an adult who's mature and can make decisions. You're that at 16. I don't care what anybody says, even going so far as to say, 16 people, when you're 16, you should be married and could be pregnant or should be pregnant. So I'm curious if 16 is an adult in your view. Why does this bill have the minor defined as 18?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
Yeah, that's a hit piece you took from Media Matters, from something when I was...
It's not a hit piece. It's your own words, man. And you've actually doubled down on it on your own platform in the modern day. So this excuse of, oh my God, that was so long ago, doesn't really fly. When you've literally doubled down in a video in, I think it was 2022, if not, I'm pretty sure it was 2022, if not 2023, when that clip first resurfaced. So like, this is not an argument you can make.
A radio host 13, 14 years ago, in my early 20s. It's also not an accurate reflection of what I actually said. I was talking about the fact that people tended to marry young historically, and that's all that was about.
So clearly that's not what that all was about, because you could see the full context for that in this clip, which Matt Walsh does not like to see. And also the idea that, if it was tradition that men were marrying people that Matt Walsh would consider to be minors for so long doesn't just make it correct. We can change our mind and progress in that way to understand that those arrangements were probably not good or consensual. Like, we as a human species do have the intellectual capacity to understand that there is a power imbalance involved there, right? A lot of the times in these historical contexts, it was the father literally bartering with another father about, okay, well, my son could marry your daughter, and it would be a beneficial engagement, and it would be like a trade deal. Only the best trade deals. Believe me, it would be like a trade deal, right? Or this was also back when women and young girls were considered the property of their husbands and fathers, so that they did not have the ability to have a say in it at all. And Matt Walsh has actually advocated for that as well, in a variety of ways, and that he doesn't think that women should be full-class citizens. He believes that they should be second-class citizens because men are stronger or whatever, and that's how it's always been or whatever.
How does that relate to this subject?
Just curious of your definition of if you feel like people are adults at 16 should.
No, people are adults at 18, but actually, your brain is not fully developed until you're 25. So we should be having a conversation.
And Matt Walsh hasn't been fully developed until whatever the fuck age he is. What is he, in his 40s? 36! You've had, what, 11 years for your brain to have already been fully developed, and you're still trying to figure it out. Shame.
So we should be having a conversation about whether we should even be doing these surgeries to people at 18. But certainly before 18, it's absurd. I mean, do you think that a 16-year-old can meaningfully consent to having their body parts removed?
So here, Matt Walsh is once again, like in the previous line of questioning, just doing a no you. That's the entire argument that he has. He doesn't have any factual basis for his arguments. He doesn't have anything in regards to his arguments other than violent rhetoric and imagery about things that are not happening and no you. He's literally trying to refute the claims of the elected representative with his own line of argumentation. But the context delivered by this representative does not allow Matt Walsh to do that. The only way Matt Walsh can try to get away with this is saying, oh, it was a hit piece and it didn't really reflect my views, even though he went on to double down on it literally in the modern day, not even back when he was just a radio host.
I mean, do you think that a 16-year-old can meaningfully consent to having their body parts removed? Do you? No?
We do not. Yeah, we ask the questions. It's not. It's Representative Hammer. You are recognized.
So apparently that's a big own. But I'm pretty sure this person is more so stunned about being asked that question because he's just doing no you. It's an absurd question. The question in itself is absurd. So I will agree that having a long amounts of silence there, you can weaponize that if you're Matt Walsh, be like, oh my God, they couldn't even answer. But the reason for not answering is not because he's having difficulty answering the question. It's because it's an absurd question, and it seems to contradict the things you've said in the past because it does. You're trying to use the same question you've been asked where you are caught in a vice grip of your own making in order to refute the elected representative. But I agree that you could weaponize that disingenuously in order to make the elected representative look bad. I agree that that's a thing that could happen. The medical age of consent in America is 16, dumbass. Well, that's the thing. Right-wingers, conservatives, Matt Walsh doesn't understand the difference between the two things. When people hear the term age of consent, they're usually thinking of sexual consent, right? That's the first thing that comes to people's minds because that's the one that's going to be most relevant, I guess, in their lives, right? But age of medical consent is also a thing, meaning that the age to which you can consent to a variety of procedures, not even just like gender-affirming ones, but a variety of them. And that usually entails, without the consent of your parents. Because for a variety of things that happen to you while you are below the age of 16 when it comes to the medical age of consent, you're going to have the consent of the parents in order to do anything. I needed a root canal at 12 and couldn't with my mom. And yeah, homeless youths, which do exist, have a lot of trouble accessing medical care because of this, because they've been kicked out by their parents or whatever, and they don't have the ability to access their parents for the consent to get those medical procedures done, right? This is a problem. So they don't understand the difference between those two concepts. And that's either because they're dumb as fuck, which is true, but also potentially because they are actively malicious and are trying to utilize the conflation of the terms to their benefit. This is where you get the so-called groomer rhetoric, right? The accusation of all LGBTQIA plus people and their allies of being child sexual predators, which Matt Walsh has defended in the past, in order to smear them in the public eye and make them look evil, unreasonable, and also as a way to deflect from the medical and scientific consensus on the issue, which is that gender-affirming care is the standard of care for the treatment of gender nonconformance in youths and adults. Whatever form that care comes in, when it comes to HRT or surgeries, is usually going to be arrived at after the consultation of medical and mental health professionals, the parents, and the person themselves, depending on the ages that they're at, of course. If it's adults, you're not going to need the parents there, blah, 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 blah. But they just don't understand the two because they want to actively conflate it. So, I can understand the weaponization of the silence at the end, but the clip doesn't make you look any better, Matt Walsh. We got another one. This is 3 minutes, 14 seconds long. Things were kicked off with this perfectly valid and relevant question from a Republican about claims that, quote, gender affirmation reduces the suicide rate. As I explained, that claim is utterly baseless. Let's see how he substantiates such a claim. So instead of using, as he has this entire time while talking about the data being on his side, violent imagery and rhetoric, let's see him actually sourcing data. Let's see. This is a rarity when it comes to conservatives. They're usually not a big fan of doing this.
Just a quick question for you. We've heard in the news last week and even today that it's pro-life to vote against this bill. We've heard that suicides are prevalent, and suicide has impacted my family, so I'm sensitive when I hear something like that. I've read some of the stuff that you've done, and I was wondering, can you speak to the statistics of mental health and suicidal tendencies for the people who have gone through transition and for people who have not? In your studies, from what I've read, can you speak to that?
That is a fair question to ask. Let's see what the response is.
Sure. Well, the claim that doing the chemical castration drugs or surgery or hormonal intervention.
Oh no, so we're still going to use emotionally charged rhetoric. Okay.
That this prevents suicide or has positive psychological effects down the line is utterly, totally baseless. There are no credible long-term studies that bear that out. And one of the reasons for that is that there couldn't possibly be any credible long-term studies because we've never done this to kids on this scale ever before in history. So that's actually incorrect. So we have, from Call Chala Tellingator, 2021, providing affirmative care to transgender and gender-diverse youth, disparities, interventions, and outcomes. This is a meta-analysis of a variety of studies. Let's see how many we got. How many references do we have here? Oh, we're still scrolling. I'm going to have to do this. We've got 106 references. This paper reviews the evolving body of research on the mental health of transgender and gender-diverse youth, minority stress experiences in families, schools, and the community impact and the health and well-being of this population due to experiences of stigma, discrimination, and rejection. Poor healthcare access and outcomes may be compounded in youth with intersectional identities. Recent findings. There is increasing evidence that gender-affirming interventions improve mental health outcomes for transgender and gender-diverse youth. TGD youth report worse mental health outcomes in invalidating school and family environments, like I said before, and improved outcomes in affirming climates. TGD youth experience significant healthcare disparities, and intersectional clinical approaches are needed to increase access to affirmative care. Summary. Providers can best support TGD youth by considering ways they can affirm these youth in their healthcare settings and helping them access support in schools, family systems, and communities. Understanding the intersection of multiple minority identities can help providers address potential barriers to care to mitigate the health disparities seen in this population. So it is true that there is a disproportionately high rate of attempted suicide in the trans community, unfortunately. However, we have a meta-analysis of studies that seems to suggest that access to gender-affirming care makes that rate of depression, of suicide drop dramatically when they have access to gender-affirming care as well as supportive family environments. Those two are the major things. Do you want to see what right-wingers like Matt Walsh advocate for? Well, it's the opposite of that. They advocate for child abuse, literally, in that Matt Walsh doesn't think that, if little Johnny says that he's actually Susie and wants to wear the color pink and play with Barbies, he doesn't think you should do that with that kid. He thinks you should force that kid to not do the things that is not hurting anybody, like wanting to wear a dress or wanting to play with Barbies instead of G.I. Joes, right? But he also wants to restrict access to gender-affirming care, which is the point of the bill that he is currently testifying in the affirmative of. So, given this meta-analysis of studies that suggests that what he is pushing would actually increase the attempted suicide rate, it seems like Matt Walsh is in favor of conditions that increase the attempted suicide rate of trans people. That is why this representative is currently bringing that up. We also, because we'll probably have it cited, have another study from a variety of doctors, Regret After Gender Affirmation Surgery, a systematic review and meta-analysis of prevalence. So here is, in regards to the specific case of surgery, the so-called regret rate. There is a bunch of studies that people like Matt Walsh will cite about, the regret rate. Background.
There is an unknown percentage of transgender and gender nonconforming individuals who undergo gender affirmation surgery, GAS, that experiences regret. Regret could lead to physical and mental morbidity, and questions that appropriateness of these procedures in selected patients. The aim of this study was to evaluate the prevalence of regret in transgender individuals who underwent GAS and evaluate associated factors. Methods. A systematic review of several databases was conducted. Random effects meta-analysis, meta-regression, and subgroup and sensitivity analyses were performed. Results. A total of 27 studies pooling 7,928 transgender patients who underwent any type of gender-affirming surgery were included. The pooled prevalence of regret after GAS was 1%, 95%, with, margins of variable not. Overall, 33% underwent transmasculine procedures and 67% transfeminine procedures. The prevalence of regret among patients undergoing transmasculine and transfeminine surgeries was less than 1% and 1% respectively. A total of 77 patients regretted having had GAS. 28 had minor and 34 had major regret based on Pfaflin's regret classification. The majority had clear regret based on Cooper and Cohen-Kettenis classification. So 77 of the 7,928 patients that this study is looking into. The pooled prevalence of regret after gender-affirming surgery was 1%. That is less than hip replacement surgery. That is less than a variety of standard procedures that are done for people for the treatment of whatever it's treating. 1%. So the assumption from right-wingers that that is leading to this disproportionate suicide rate is completely baseless and counterfactual. But I'm pretty sure people like Matt Walsh are aware of that. Conclusions. Based on this review, there is an extremely low prevalence of regret in transgender patients after GAS. We believe the study corroborates the improvements made in regard to selection criteria for GAS. However, there is a high subjectivity in the assessment of regret and lack of standardized questionnaires, which highlight the importance of developing validated questionnaires in this population. Matt Walsh doesn't want that to happen either, by the way. Not only does Matt Walsh not want there to be gender-affirming care rendered to anybody, youth or adult, he also is not in favor of any kind of insight into it, any kind of inquiry into it, any kind of studies into it, clearly. If he doesn't think it should happen, then clearly he's not going to be in support of research about it, right? So what he is saying here is false.
This current, shall we say, crop of children, they are the guinea pigs. This is all experimental. We're sort of trying it out on them to see if it works. Now, they have attempted a few times to do studies, and the interesting thing is that the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, WPATH, which is a radical far-left pro-trans organization, they commissioned a study to try to prove that, that hormones and puberty blockers decrease suicide rates among trans-identified youth. And even in their own study, they found that they couldn't prove it. They couldn't make that link because it's just not possible to do.
Just not possible to do. Now, you will see, the article has been corrected. So let's see that. Erratum. The authors of the March 2021 Gender Affirming Surgery miniseries article entitled Regret After Gender Affirmation Surgery, yada yada yada, wish to make the following corrections in the tables and figures. The systematic review was reconducted, and the meta-analysis was rerun with the updated numbers, with no significant or major changes. The updated tables and figures are included below. So we'll add links to all of this in the description as we always do. Also, literally every single medical organization disagrees with the pushing of legislation that Matt Walsh is currently advocating for. We've talked about this in the past, but I'll bring it up again. So we have a table of statements opposing legislation to limit gender-affirming medical care for transgender youth by organization and the policy statement title, which you can read here. We've got the American Medical Association, the American College of Physicians, American Academy of Family Physicians, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, American Osteopathic Association, and others. You've got the American Psychiatric Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the Endocrine Society, and the Pediatric Endocrine Society, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and U.S. Professional Association for Transgender Health, all have explicitly stated that they oppose legislation to limit gender-affirming medical care for transgender youth. On the other hand, you have this bozo. So I think I know which side I'm going to be more charitable to.
The number of trans-identified youth has skyrocketed in recent years. We're talking about exponential 10x, 20x growth.
The left-handedness graph, by the way. It's the left-handedness graph. They're always talking about, oh my God, it's a social contagion. Oh my God, there are so many people identifying as trans now. Yeah, if you suppress an identity for long enough, you're going to have less reports of that identity to people running studies on the prevalence of said identity. But once you stop suppressing it, you're going to start to see an uptick, especially after there is a large amount of acceptance in that regard. And then eventually it will plateau back out to the rate that it was likely always at. It is the classic left hand in this graph. But of course, we have to use scary rhetoric and violent imagery to make our arguments because we don't have any actual good arguments.
Have increased. And what we hear from the pro-trans side is that, well, this is not a social contagion. It's just that, there's always been this many trans people. It's just that they were not in an affirming environment before in history, and so they couldn't come out. And now, for the first time, trans people have the ability to live their truth, so to speak.
You also have this when it comes to gay people, lesbians, etc., etc. If you make situations in society so hostile to said identities, people out of their own self-preservation are not going to be out about it. They're not going to be very vocal about it for fear of social retribution, which, by the way, Matt Walsh is an enjoyer of, right?
Well, if that's the case, and there have always been these sort of like millions of trans people, and if it's also true that if we don't affirm them, that it would cause them to commit suicide, then we should be able to look back in history and find just this unbroken, incredible epidemic of children mysteriously killing themselves because they weren't being affirmed as trans. And what you find is that that didn't exist.
Because the studies didn't happen. If there is a societal environment where being that identity has this kind of stigma and you receive all manner of social repercussion for letting people know you are that identity, why the fuck would people be doing studies polling these people about this shit? I don't know that people out of their own self-preservation would feel safe enough to respond, yes, I am trans, yes, I am gay, yes, I'm in an interracial marriage, to studies for fear that that information might come back to them and the social repercussions that they're afraid of might be wrought upon them. So they're less likely to answer these kinds of questionnaires. They died? Yeah, but you would poll the parents about, oh, this child committed suicide. What do you think the reasons are for that? If it is the case that the societal conditions are transphobic in nature, those parents might also be transphobic and not believe that their child was trans or even had the capacity to understand it, so they wouldn't be able to give that kind of information either. Luckily, as time progresses, as research and studies are done and data is collected, we can change our understanding of these topics over time. This is a thing that is toxic to Matt Walsh. He doesn't like it. It's like the sun in vampires. He does not like it.
I mean, the youth suicide rate has increased exponentially alongside trans affirmation. So trans affirmation causes the suicide rate, not the other way around.
That is counterfactual, as we've talked about. That is literally counterfactual. It is an alternate reality that this delusional man has constructed in his mind in order to work backward from his conclusion of he doesn't think trans people have the right to exist. That's it. That's all that is. We've substantiated this already.
Last thing I'll note is that the suicide rate among trans-identified people is sky high. It remains sky high. All the data shows this. It remains sky high.
Yeah, who did that?
Even after surgery. And in fact, in the most reliable data that we have, it's years after surgery when suicidality is the highest for trans.
It does not. The reason why we don't have those numbers is because the Nazis burned those books. Well, it is true that the first books that the Nazis in Nazi Germany ever burned were from the Institute for Sexual Health in Germany, which was founded by Magnus Hirschfeld, a gay Jewish man. All of those books were research into gender identity, sexuality. The first vaginoplasty was performed there. So it is true that we lost a lot of data, research, and study into the broader topic of gender identity, sexuality, surgeries, and affirmative procedures for them. But luckily, Matt Walsh also doesn't like that these studies are being performed, and also his good friend Ron DeSantis, or at least the person that he sucks the dick of because he thinks he's a good candidate and is currently trying to legislate trans people out of existence in Florida, is also banning books, banning history, and trying to rewrite history in children's history books in order to push his version of history and the facts onto those impressionable children instead of actually teaching them the reality of the matter. So he is kind of in support of that kind of tactic, right?
That's the reality.
It's not the reality. I like that we don't have any kind of response to that in the clips that Matt Walsh has decided to show, and that's all we're seeing so far. So it seems like the full context of the clip that Matt Walsh himself is willing to post and quote tweet is not enough to not make him entirely embarrassed in this engagement. I'm sorry. You're an embarrassment to the human race. We hope you do better, but I don't think you will. And you've embarrassed yourself because you don't know what you're talking about. You are working backward from your conclusion that you do not think trans people have a right to exist, and you are manipulating a variety of things and using violent imagery and rhetoric in order to scare people into going along with you. That's all that it is. It's very simple, very clean, cut and dry. Now, of course, I have to spend an hour talking about this where the actual testimony was, what, like 12 minutes long? Because, like I say, it is easier for lies to spread than truth to spread. Because it requires more work to arrive at the truth, and conservatives just don't want to work anymore. It is what it is. They just don't want to work anymore. So they're not gonna. So yeah, that was fun. I had a good time. It was a lot of weak shit in my comments as well, when it comes to the negative commentary from the people coming in. Like, oh my god, that's such a, what about the full clip? What about the full clip? Like, at least call me a slur. At least, you know, say I'm not a woman or something like that. Like, at least be a little spicy about it. Oh my god, the unedited clip, we looked at the unedited clips, my friends, is not looking good. In fact, it looks worse for him now. He looks worse after having been a part of that testimony. He probably would have benefited from abstaining. This video's Connor Call It is all for Newt. Looks like your support of my content wasn't all for Newt, huh? If you'd like to be the next Connor Call It, all you can do is follow me on Twitter at ConnorCC, retweet my video links when they go live, remember to subscribe to the channel, all notifications on, hit the bell, leave a like if you'd like, comment something down below about how Matt Walsh is a threat to society and should not be able to exist in public at all, much less a public platform that has reached to hundreds of thousands of people, and have a good day.